How to use a beach ball with a globe on it to figure out how much water there is on the world. Stay tuned and we'll talk about it. So we've been setting up something called confidence intervals, and we've been talking about margin of error. And so that's all going to come together now in one of the big topics for AP Stats. So what we're doing in this one is you will toss this around, and we basically just figure out where your pinky is. And you say, is it land or is it on the ocean? And from there, we get a proportion. So we're going to talk about that, go through all of the criteria for what we need to do. And you can find all the notes down below. Make sure you also comment if you need to, like, subscribe, all that other good stuff. Send it to your parents. And let's get going. So again, we've got the beach ball, tossing it around, and we do it a total of at least 50 times. I'm going to share with you what my class did, and then we'll get to exactly how you can do things. So when we did this morning, we tossed around 50 places, as I said, and we got 32 water. So when the kids had it, they looked, it was water. So we're going to calculate out the proportion. That's nothing new, so that's going to be 64%. Just divide water by that. So here is where things are going to do. There's a 4-step process going through to set up confidence intervals. The first part is state, and this is going to sound a lot like what you probably have learned in your English class in terms of setting everything up. So the first thing we're going to do we're going to go through and we're going to state what we're trying to find. So we're trying to find P, which is the true proportion of the Earth that's covered by water. We also need to say how confident we want to be. So our confidence level is going to be 95%. Now 95% is kind of the go-to. Sometimes AP questions will tell you specifically what you want, but what it wants. If not, 95 is kind of a good default. Now, we need to name the procedure. This is one of the things that you need to do in order to get full credit. And either you do it by name or by formula, so we want to make sure you do both, just in case you forget one. So we are doing a one sample Z interval for P. One sample because we just took one sample. Z interval, we're going to kind of talk about eventually when we do means, a different type of interval called a T interval. So we're using the Z tables, and for P because we're doing a proportion. So one sample, Z interval for P. And this is all part of the plan section. I forgot to say that. What type of teacher am I? I don't know. So you're going to name what it is. Now, in the previous videos here that we've talked about, remember, there are 3 things that you need in order to make sure things are valid. First thing, what is it? You said random, you are correct. So we would say, okay, we picked all the locations because we were tossing the ball around, we randomly picked. You can also pick, there's some applets out there that will, and I'll put a link to that down below too, where you can just randomly pick places around the world and you can do the same thing yourself. Now remember, randomness allows us to generalize what we're finding to the population. So if everything's random in our sample, then we can say whatever we find, we can go larger than that, and not just for the sample itself. Here, you also need the 10% rule. 10% rule allows us to say things are independent. So here we're saying our 50 choices are less than 1/10 of all locations around the world, which I hope is pretty self-explanatory. So that allows us to say, hey, we can use the statistics that we find as representations of the stats that we need. And last but not least, our big one is normality. For proportions, remember, we need to do large counts. So again, we've got n times p, that's bigger than or equal to 10. So we had 32 waters and we had 18 lands, both of which are bigger than 10, which means that you're far enough out away from the ends where things can get kind of jumbled. So we can say we can use the Z table for this, okay? So we've stated what we did and we're planned what we're going to do. So we made sure that all the criteria has been met and we told everybody what we're going to look at. So now we're going to get to the meat of this, all of the doing. Most AP Stats teachers will tell you to write down all of this to make sure that you get full credit. It's if for some reason you forgot the name, the general formula oftentimes is going to be enough, not the general formula, I tell you the specific formula is going to be enough to get you credit for that because this is the general formula for finding a Z interval for P. This first one here is important because that is going to be the same thing every time we do a confidence interval. So that's going to help, if you write that out, it's going to reinforce it in your head, so you're not going to have to worry about what are the parts, or if you get stuck, you can kind of rely back on that. So the formula, like we talked about in the previous lesson, p hat plus or minus z star times the standard error being, sorry, those should be p hats all over n. After you do that, you need to plug the numbers in. You don't have to show all of your work, but you need to show the beginning of your work and the final answer. So here is everything plugged in. 64%, that's my p hat. We're doing 1.960 because that's the z-score for 95%. And again, we're finding the middle 95%. And you can do that either through your table A, or you can go through and do it with inverse norm on your calculator. I've done this. There's my standard error there, and then I did the math from there. Okay? And that's the whole thing. So then we have to do the plus or minus. So now here is our interval. The bottom number that we're expecting. And remember, this is 95% confident that we're capturing the true mean of how much water is around the world. The bottom number is just around 50%. The upper number is just below 80%. So we were 95% confident that, well, actually, that's going to get into the next section. I'm already getting ahead of myself. So we stated what we're going to do. We planned what we did. We did it. So now, just like a good essay up in English, you're going to interpret what we did. And here's your interpretation. And this is going to be the phrase that pays for most of your testing. And usually on the AP test, it's either going to be a confidence interval or a significance test that we'll get to here in a bit. But this is how you're going to say it. We are 95% confident that the interval from 0.507 to 0.773 captures the true proportion of Earth that is covered by water. Okay? So nothing super mind-blowing here, but it is a procedure that you have to do because, again, if you want to have this set up, you need to make sure that you check all the right boxes as you go. Before we go, if you want to subscribe to my channel and get more of this as I make the new videos over here, you can click over here on my logo. If you want to see the next video in the series, click over here. And that will take you to the second part of this where we kind of make this a little bit more mathy and give you all the breakdowns on that. So that's going to be the formalize everything. Other than that, we will see you soon.